Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya Namaskaram. Today I'm going to be talking about verse 871 of Guru Vācaka Kōvai. What Bhagavan says in this verse is, I'll read it's two sentences. I'll read the Tamil and then the English for each sentence. Tetrame meyaha tunivikum indriya tetram viparita tetramam. The sense conviction that concludes the world appearance alone to be real is an inverted conviction. Totrate te indriyamum te vanam totratodu or uruvitru aha una. Know the senses by which the appearance is known, and the knower with the appearance to be one form. My explanatory paraphrase for this is, the sense conviction, that is the conviction caused by sensory perception, that concludes that the appearance, the world of physical phenomena, alone to be real, is a viparita conviction. Viparita means inverted, reversed, opposed, or contrary. So it implies it's a conviction that is opposed to the truth. That is, it is quite contrary or quite opposite to the truth. In other words, Bhagavan is clearly implying here the world appearance is not real, but we wrongly arrive at the conclusion that is tetram means conviction. It implies conclusion. We all naturally conclude this world to be real, but according to Bhagavan, that is viparita. It is contrary to the truth. Know the senses by which the appearance is known, and the knower, together with the appearance, to be one form. What that implies is the knower, namely ego, the appearance it knows, and the senses by which it knows it, all form a single and inseparable triad or triputi. And since they appear in waking and dream but disappear in sleep, they are all equally unreal. So Bhagavan is time and time again driving home this point, but this triputi knowledge, the knowledge that involves a knower or subject, an object or thing known, and a means by which that thing is known, are all unreal. The real knowledge, the real awareness, is only the pure awareness that shines as one, undivided by these this separation into these three components. Sadhu Om's paraphrase for this, the meaning of his paraphrase is, the five sense knowledge, namely the knowledge that seems to be derived from the five senses, which makes one believe the world appearances which are perceived to be real, is a conclusion that is viparita, inverted, reversed, or contrary. And he adds in brackets, unmeku marana, that means opposed to the truth. So it's a wrong conclusion we come to. And he mentioned, he puts the world appearances in plural, because it's not only the appearance of this world, but also the appearance of any world we perceive in a dream or in any other state. All worlds are unreal. That is Bhagavan's firm conclusion. And then Sadhu Om paraphrase continues, know that the five senses which give and show that world appearance, and jiva, ego, who perceives it, are together just an unreal form, which is one among those appearances. And then he gives an explanatory note for that. Since the seer, the jiva, the seen, the world appearance that is perceived, and the seeing, the 5 kinds of sensory perception, are a triputi, a set of 3 factors of transitive awareness, namely the knower, the known, and the means of knowing. All 3 are said to be actually unreal. The import is that even jiva, who is the seer, together with his act of seeing, are just what are included among the world appearances which are seen. As an illustration, let us suppose that a film is made as if a cinema show is happening in front of a king. If that film is projected on a screen, in it, even the king who is watching that cinema show is just an image within that film. So this is an idea that Bhagavan also expressed in verse 160, in which he said the seer is also a picture on the screen. That is, we seem to be a seer of this world. We seem to know the world only when we experience ourselves as a body within that world. In dream, when we dream, we always experience ourselves as a body, as a person within that dream world, as a part of the dream world. So we never experience the world like, for example, we experience a cinema show or something on television where clearly we are something separate and what we're watching is something separate. When we experience the world, we always experience ourselves as a part of the world. This is what Bhagavan points this out in so many ways. For example, in the 4th verse of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, he says, if one's self is a form, the world and God will be likewise. If one's self is not a form, who can see their forms and how? In other words, we experience the appearance of forms, the forms that constitute the world, and the form of God. Whatever conception we have of God is a form. So we experience these only because we experience ourselves as a form. But what we actually are is just that formless awareness. If we experience ourselves just as that formless awareness, no forms will appear. So it's, as Bhagavan says in that 4th verse, the nature of what is seen is according to the nature of the seer. So only when we experience ourselves as a form do we experience a multitude of other forms. When we experience ourselves as we actually are, as the pure awareness I am, awareness of being, Satchit, then there will be no forms will appear. So that is the import of this verse. That is, Bhagavan says the same thing again and again in so many ways. Why Bhagavan so often talks about the unreality of the world? Why should we be concerned about the world when our aim is to know ourselves? Because we experience the world only because we don't know ourselves as we actually are. Because we know ourselves as a body, we consequently experience a world. So the two defining characteristics of ego are that as ego, we always experience ourselves as I am this body, whatever the body may be, and we consequently experience the appearance of other things, namely this world, or whatever world appears. So as ego, we're always aware of ourselves as I am this body, and consequently we're aware of the appearance of other things. So in order to know ourselves as we actually are, we need to remove this false awareness of ourselves as I am this body, and thereby remove the awareness of the appearance of other things. Bhagavan has expressed this in so many ways. For example, in the third and fourth paragraphs of Nāṉ Ār, in the third paragraph, he says, just as until the knowledge of the illusory snake, which is just a superimposition, until that knowledge of the snake is removed, we cannot know the rope as it is. Likewise, until the perception of the world is removed, we cannot know ourselves as we actually are, he says in the third paragraph. And in the fourth paragraph, he explains that the world is just is nothing but thought. It's projected by the mind, just like a spider projects thread out of itself and draws it back into itself. So the mind projects the world out of itself, or seemingly out of itself, and draws it back in. So in waking and dream, we are projecting the world out. When we subside in sleep, we withdraw that appearance within ourselves. So the whole thing is only mental. So the Bhagavan's conclusion is, therefore, when the world appears, Swarupa does not appear. And when Swarupa appears, that is, when it shines as it is, the world does not appear. The two cannot appear together, because the Swarupa means what we actually are. So long as it is ourself that we see as this world. So long as we're seeing ourselves as this world, we're not seeing ourselves as we actually are. When we see ourselves as we actually are, there'll be no world to be known. So does anyone have any questions about this verse or the implications of this verse?
There don't seem to be any questions on the verses. Does anybody have a question on today's verse?
It's quite a straightforward idea. It's just a matter of, are we willing to accept this? Our natural inclination is to take this world to be real. But so only if we have a very if we understand the nature of this world is just to give us suffering, and that we can experience the infinite happiness that is our own real nature only by going beyond this false perception of ourself as a body in a seemingly external world. Only if we sincerely want to go beyond all this, we'll be ready to accept this. So long as we're still strongly attached to the body and to our life in this world, we'll be unwilling to accept these ideas. That's why Bhagavan may be popular. People love Bhagavan, but if they know his teachings, the majority of us find it very difficult to accept this. But if we are willing to accept this, this is the foundation for following this path, which is the path to infinite and eternal happiness, which is what we always actually are.
Of course, accepting it is one thing and experiencing it is another. Yeah,
but at least if we're not even willing to accept it, we're not going to experience it. We at least, as a starting point, we at least need to be willing to accept that this is all just an appearance. It's just like it's a dream, as Bhagavan said. And if we're willing to accept that, then we can start to follow this path to free ourselves. When we're actually trying to practice self-investigation, Atma-vichara, that is, when we're trying to be self-attentive, our mind keeps on going outwards towards the appearance of phenomena. Why? Because we still take them to be real, and we still have so much desire and attachment for these things. We still believe that that we can derive happiness from these things. Whereas Bhagavan said there's not an iota of happiness in any of these things. Happiness is our own real nature. So we want to experience the infinite happiness, but we're all seeking. We need to be ready to give up our attachment to this body and world and to turn our whole attention back within. So these teachings have tremendous practical implication. To the extent to which we're ready to accept these, it will make it easy for us to let go of these things and turn within.
So, Michael, can I ask a question on this?
Yes.
Yeah. So, so the verse basically implies that the ego, the senses, and the object,
Yes.
which are being termed as the Triputi.
Yes.
All three of them are unreal.
All are unreal, yes. They're all mere appearances. They appear in waking and dream, they disappear in sleep. Whatever appears and disappears is not real. Because what in Vedanta, but again, Advaita Vedanta, what is meant by real is what actually exists. Anything that doesn't actually exist, even if it seems to exist, it is not real. So what is it that actually exists? According to Bhagavan, as he says in the 7th paragraph of Nāṉ Ār, Yatharthamai Uļļadu Atma-sarupam Andre. What actually exists is only Atma-swarupa. That is, ourself as we actually are, what we actually are, that alone is what actually exists. Everything else is mere karpane. It's mere mental fabrication. And that mental fabrication, it's all an appearance. So long as we are aware of this body and world, we are seeing ourselves as something other than what we actually are. So when we see ourselves as we actually are, just like when we see so long as we see the snake, we are not seeing the rope as it is. All the time we're seeing nothing but the rope. But we're not seeing it as it is. We're seeing it as a snake. When we see it as it is, as a rope, then we no longer see it as a snake. Exactly the same is the case with this appearance of this Triputi, the knowing ego and all the things known by it, and whatever means it has for knowing these things. These are all a superimposition upon our real nature, which is just pure Satchit, pure being awareness, which is infinite and indivisible.
But who realizes that all three are unreal?
That's an important question. That is, ego can never know this, because when we know ourselves as we actually are, we cease to be ego and remain as we actually are. So ultimately, Bhagavan often used to say, jnana me jnani. Jnana in this context means awareness, pure awareness. So jnani means what knows pure awareness. So what is it that knows pure awareness? Only pure awareness knows pure awareness. So it's only by being that we can know that. But for the pure awareness that we actually are, it is ever pure awareness, never undergoes any change whatsoever. So it always knows itself as it is. This ego is just a mirage. It has no reality at all, other than the underlying reality of the pure awareness that we actually are. So what Bhagavan sometimes used to say, there's nothing new to realize. Well, Bhagavan sometimes very, very nicely, he said, the real is always real, so it doesn't need to be realized. The problem is that we've realized the unreal. So all we need to do is to unrealize the unreal, and the real alone will remain. Bhagavan didn't often speak in English, but he did say this in English because of the nature of the words. That is, this realize, we usually take realize to mean coming to know something or coming to understand it. But Bhagavan, taking it in his literal sense, but it means to make real. We don't need to make the real real, because the real is always real. The problem is we made the unreal seem to be real, so we need to unrealize the unreal, and the real alone will remain. And we can unrealize the unreal only by turning our entire attention within and thereby subsiding back into the pure, into the Sat-chit that we actually are. And when we subside and dissolve back into that, that alone remains. So ego will never realize what it actually is, because as soon as we realize what we actually are, we'll cease to be ego and remain as we always actually are. That's why he ends verse 38 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu saying, Nittama mukti nilai. This is the state of liberation which is eternal. It's not something, and now because we seem to be in bondage, liberation seems to be something that we need to attain. But when we actually know ourselves as we actually are, we'll know there never was any bondage, and therefore liberation alone is eternal.
They use the illustration of a dog's tail that is always curled, and you try and straighten it and it goes back to being curled. Yes, so our mind keeps on returning to its original condition.
That is the nature. But as Krishna says in the Gita, wherever the mind goes, however many times it goes, you need to bring it back and fix it in self. Bhagavan says the same. Whatever may appear, to whom does it appear? We need to investigating to whom it appears means turning our attention away from whatever appears back towards ourself, the one to whom it appears.
Should we move on to the next question on the verses? Prasad, you had a question?
Yes, thanks, Shalini. Namaskara, Michael.
Namaskara.
So in this verse, Michael, it's mentioned that it talks about the appearances, things appear to us.
Yes.
Is it different to our desire to see something? So one is, if we say we are the self and in our light, everything appears,
Yes.
That's our, the light is being shed on the Vāsanās, and then we are seeing things.
Yes.
Is it any different to be desiring to see something? Or they're both the same?
Well,
so one is the appearances are coming up, and one is wanting to see something. Isn't it?
Okay. Whatever appears is what is called a Vishaya, an object or phenomenon. The seeds that appear as these objects or phenomena are Vishaya Vāsanās. So our own inclination to see these things is what brings these things into being. So Bhagavan said, all that we see outside, it all exists within. It's just a projection of our own Vāsanās. Bhagavan used the analogy of a cinema projector. All the pictures that are seen on the screen, they're all there on the film reel. So he compared the film reel to the Vāsanās, and the picture that appears on the screen to the world appearance. So if we had no desire to see these things, we wouldn't see them. But why this desire to experience things other than ourselves arises? The root cause is ego. Because as ego, we limit ourselves. That is what we actually are, is infinite, without any limits whatsoever. But as ego, we experience ourselves as, I am this body. This body, obviously, it occupies a tiny place in the vast space. It occupies a tiny period in the vast time. So we limit ourselves so much. So we see the appearance of other things. And because having limited ourselves, we feel incomplete. So since we feel incomplete, we want to complete ourselves by acquiring all these external things, whether those external things means material wealth. That's one way people try to fill up the inadequacy that we all feel when we rise as ego. Some people seek to fill it by learning, by acquiring knowledge about philosophy or science or history or geography or whatever it is. Some people seek to fill it by entertainment, by sport and cinema and whatever it may be. Some people seek to fill it by gaining name and fame. In so many ways, we try to compensate for this inadequacy, try to fill up what we feel we are lacking. So it is the nature of the mind to go outwards, to desire things other than itself, to desire experiences of this or that. But that is Maya. That's what keeps us caught up in this perpetual cycle of birth and death, of karma. Why we do any action? We do actions in order to experience things. Those things that we're seeking to experience are things other than ourselves. And so long as we're seeking happiness in things other than ourselves, we are caught up in this whole web of desire. So the only way to wean our mind off its Vishaya Vāsanās, its inclinations to seek happiness in things other than itself, is to patiently and persistently practice turning our attention back within. In regard to what Chris said, another thing Krishna said in Gita, that is what I said earlier about wherever the mind goes, you need to bring it back. I think that's chapter 6, verse 25 or 26. It's just after he says, Atma samstam mana kritva na kinchit api chintayat. Fix your mind in Atman. Do not think of anything else. In other words, be self-attentive with not thinking of not attending to anything else. Maybe about 10 verses later, Arjuna says, this mind is very difficult to control. It's easier to control the wind than to control the mind. And Krishna said, yes, it is very difficult, but it can be done by abhyasa and vairagya. Abhyasa means practice. We need to persevere in trying to turn, however many times our mind may go out, it's going out towards these phenomena. To whom do all these phenomena appear? To me. So we turn it back to ourselves. That's the abhyasa. And the vairagya is the freedom from desire to keep on going outwards. So these two go hand in hand. Without vairagya, we won't be able to do the abhyasa. And without the abhyasa, we won't develop the vairagya. So they go hand in hand.
Right. Thank you, Mike.
Right.
There's a question on the verses. It's a question for practical purposes on the verse. How do we live between the false ego world we project and truth of the world that Bhagavan teaches us? When we're accepting this, how do we still interact with those we're very close with who have no acceptance or understanding of it? I know Bhagavan offered teachings at the level his devotees were at, but given our precarious understanding, it's difficult to have a foot in both worlds when it comes to living with people we love who have no understanding of this teaching. I'm not suggesting we're better than them. It's just a new understanding they don't yet understand, and that's challenging when we love and live together closely.
Yes, yes. This is a case for all of us. But we need to, that is, firstly, we need to understand when we say, how do we live together? How do we behave together and everything? Who is it who is living with these loved ones? Who is it who is behaving, showing kindness and concern and love for them? It is the person we seem to be. The more we withdraw our attention back within, the less we will be concerned about ourselves. And so naturally, the more kind and caring and loving we will become. So actually, if we're truly following this path, we will be more kind, more caring, more loving to our loved ones and also to others. Our love shouldn't be limited just to my family or my friends. We have to. Well, if we are following this path of self-investigation, this is the path of subsidence. We are subsiding more and more within. And then the narrowness, we won't have that narrowness. So we won't look upon people as others, that is, whoever it may be. Anyone who's suffering, well, it doesn't matter what religion they belong to, what the color of their skin is, what race they belong to, we feel sympathy for suffering, and we feel sympathy for the circumstances of the world that create all these conflicts. That if we see the world, there's so many conflicts are taking place. Why these conflicts are arising? Ultimately, it's all down to ego, because I identify myself. I belong to such and such a religion. I belong to such and such a race. I belong to such and such a community. These people are others. All this othering of others is rooted in ego. So the more we follow Bhagavan's path, the more we subside within, the more we will naturally feel compassion and care and have feelings of kindness and concern for others, whether they're our very close dear ones or whether they're complete strangers. We will see ourselves in all of them and feel that compassion. So as far as our near and dear ones are concerned, not everyone is ready to accept these things. But we can still be kind and loving to them and help them at their own level. As you, I think you said, or someone said, Bhagavan gave teachings that were suited to each individual. So Bhagavan is an extremely gentle teacher. He doesn't force anything on anyone. When we're ready to accept it, he says the plain truth. When we're not ready to accept it, he will express the same truth in a way that will be palatable for us, to help us to proceed further towards this ultimate goal of complete surrender of ego. So it is actually living a family life, having loved ones, those we care for. They may not be identical. I mean, in no family, everyone's identical. Even husband and wife, there'll be differences. Any husband and wife, there'll be so many differences between them. But we don't concern ourselves with the differences. We concern ourselves with what is common. And basically, we're all the same. Not only human beings, every living being. Every living being is seeking survival. They're seeking food, they're seeking comfort, they're seeking all these things. So we're all basically looking for the same thing. But why we're looking for food and security and comfort and all these things, because we have limited ourselves with this body, and so we seem to depend on all these things. If I am this body, then I depend on food to live. I depend on clean air, clean water. I depend on having a warm house in a cold climate and a cool house in a hot climate. I depend upon clothing, and so many things we depend upon if we have this body. So all living creatures, it's the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. Ultimately, it's a struggle for survival. So long as we limit ourselves as this body is something very, very vulnerable. So we are all, one way or other, struggling for survival, struggling for the same basic things, the same comforts and securities and all these things. So we can see that in anyone, even if they're not having the same view of the world that we have, we can still have empathy with them, because we can see ourselves in others. So we actually, if we're truly following this path, we become more loving, more caring, both for those who are near and dear to us and for the complete stranger. Was that a clear answer to your question?
There's just one thing I wanted to mention. It's something which the Buddha has said, it's very fundamental teaching, and which is, do not cling to views, that is to drishtis, that is whether it's ideologies and so on, which is very much what you're saying, not to religions, not to any ideologies. Because of course, this is the biggest delusion of all, I think, or at least one of the biggest, is based on identities. But one of the things which is there when we talk about Vāsanās, that even if we say, at some level, mentally accept the world as unreal, and we try our best not to cling to anything, and we try to subside within, and so on. Nevertheless, I think it's quite important, I feel, from whatever I have seen and heard of sort of teachers and so on, that there also has to be enough humility to accept that the path we choose, and that we think, and which is perhaps preferable for us and very good for us, perhaps, and we think to be the best and the whatever we take it to be, that too is really simply based on our vasanas. And because because we come across this so often, and I find it quite difficult to negotiate, that there is time and again, even with spiritual teachers and so on, this kind of there is a sort of a putting down, this is the best, my path, or either implicitly or explicitly. And this is sort of kind of limits the mind, it is a restriction. And I've only come across one person, quite a young gentleman who is not a gentleman or a person, really, where there is the ability to truly not cling to anything, including the teaching, including the ism and the path. And it opens up this true sort of expanse, this true emptiness towards all things, not clinging to it. It's just, you can call it whatever, it doesn't matter. Self, pure consciousness, and so on. And one of the things which I've often wondered about, not often, but at least lately, when we talk about self-investigation, Atma-vichara, it is, as far as I can see, it is the investigation of consciousness, of one's own consciousness, of just consciousness as it is. And except for one Indian tradition, which is the Charvaka and Lokayata, what is called a more materialist tradition, every single Indian tradition has delved into the investigation of consciousness. And it's hundreds of years, often thousands of years of tradition of a very, very serious seeking. And I think the respect is very important. It doesn't matter whether it's the Buddhists or the Jains or the Sankhya or the yoga or whatever. You have great masters, and there's a lot to be learned if we just let ourselves be open a little bit. It's not only Advaita Vedanta, which is necessarily the path. It may be the best for me. Perhaps it is very suited to me, but that's because of my own sanskaras and vasanas. So I think that spiritual humility and not spiritual ego becomes very, very important. It's just something which has always bothered me.
I think that is true. It's very important if we're following this path, but we should have a strong conviction that this is the best path for me. But we shouldn't try to impose that on others. We should respect that others are. We're all at different stages of spiritual development, and different ways are appropriate and different at different stages. What is appropriate to teach children in a kindergarten, it wouldn't be appropriate to start teaching that in university. And what's appropriate to teach at university wouldn't be appropriate to teach in kindergarten. So there are so many different levels, so many different ways people are coming. That is, ultimately, we're all on a journey of return to our source. But the particular paths we take on the way, what is suitable for one may not be suitable for another. That's why in talks it's recorded when Yogananda asked Bhagavan what teaching should be given for the uplift of the masses. Bhagavan said teachings cannot be given en masse. Teaching must be according to the taught. And Bhagavan lived that. I mean, Bhagavan did. We can see if you read books like talks, how he gives different answers to different types of questions to suit people at the level from which they're coming. But if we want to know what his core teaching is, then for us, he's written it all down in works like Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, Nāṉ Ār, and Upadeshundya, Āhāra-niyama, Stuti Panchakam, and Muruganar has recorded it in Vācaka Kōvai. So these are very, very useful for those who are ready to accept what Bhagavan has brought to the world. But not everyone who came to Bhagavan was ready for this. So Bhagavan answered people in what was most appropriate for them. And actually, Bhagavan never sought to give, even his core teachings, he never sought to give these teachings. But by divine grace, we had Sivaprakasam Pillai came and asked a series of questions that became Nāṉ Ār. Muruganar came and prompted Bhagavan to write Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu and Upadeshundya and Atma-vichara. Ākāśa prompted Bhagavan to write Āhāra-niyama Stuti Panchakam. So all these things, it's all part of a divine plan that these things should come out. But Bhagavan never, of his own accord, sought to give teachings to anyone. For many years, nobody really knew that Bhagavan had any teachings.
There's a question from Sadashiva.
Yes, hello, Michael.
Hello.
When you were talking about the world being mental creation, I was thinking about the relationship between the Ākāśa and what the scientists call the quantum field and the observer. And I was wondering, when Atma-vichara takes place, if we go deep enough, do we get past that Ākāśa or quantum field, and we get past the faculty of creating the world, and we get to pure Atma? Is that?
Yes, that is all these things, quantum fields or whatever it is, string theory, all these, so many scientific theories are there, and so scientific discoveries and so on. But these are all concerning the field of phenomena. In other words, they're all concerning the objective appearance. We are seeking to know the reality of the subject, the one to whom all these things appear. According to Bhagavan, these appearances have no independent existence. They appear only in the view of ego. Without ego, they don't exist at all. That's why he says in verse 26 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, for example, if ego comes into being, everything comes into being. If ego is not, everything is not. Ego itself is everything. That is what we are seeing as all this. We as ego are seeing ourselves as all of this multiplicity. So,
Yes, ego.
so we are this spiritual investigation is going in the opposite direction to scientific investigation. Scientific investigation is going outwards towards phenomena. It's studying the appearance. Spiritual investigation is studying the one to whom the appearance appears.
So ego is basically identifying with that which you've created in the Akashic field.
Exactly.
Okay.
That is this body, which we all we each experience a body as I, but this body is just like the body in dream. In dream, we experience a body as I, but that body doesn't exist. We don't go to some world and occupy some body and experience a dream. No, it's ego has projected this body, and through the five senses of that body, it projects the world. That's what happens in dream. Bhagavan said this is exactly the same.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Right, thank you.
Shalini, may I ask a question?
Of course, yes, of course.
May I?
Yes, please, Shraddhi, please. Do
Okay.
ask.
Michael, at the last meeting with the Ramana Center of Houston group, you talked about food and all of that, and smita ahara abhyasa of mita ahara, sattvic mita ahara, and all that, which is excellent. There's one thing that I think we all forgot to remember to mention, which was the importance of periodic fasting as well. Could you say something about that, perhaps?
Yeah, well, I mean, it is it is generally considered that fasting there's a spiritual benefit to fasting, because we are not burdening the body and allow the body to purify itself or whatever. And so we're relieving the mind of that. So that's an opportunity to turn the mind within. But Bhagavan wasn't too Bhagavan didn't advocate these things too much. In fact, there's the story of Echammal's niece. I think her name was Rajamal. She was a young girl. She came to Bhagavan. That is, Echammal used to send food to Bhagavan. Usually she would bring herself. Sometimes she would send through her niece, Rajamal. So Rajamal was a young girl. One day when she brought food to Bhagavan, Bhagavan asked her, Bhagavan knew it's Ekadasi. So Ekadasi is a day when many people fast. For those who don't know, Ekadasi means the 11th moon. So it's
Ekadashi, right? Ekadashi.
Ekadasi, yes. So that occurs twice a month, both the waxing and the waning. So it's a custom, particularly among Vaishnavas and among Smartas and other groups of people, to observe a fast on Ekadasi. So Bhagavan knew it's Ekadasi, and he knew she wouldn't be eating that day. So when she brought the food to Bhagavan, he asked her, have you eaten? She said no. He asked her, then let's share this together. But she was very adamant she wouldn't. Then Bhagavan said, all these things are not necessary. You're a young child. You should eat. But she was very adamant because she'd been brought up to believe in all these things. So another day when she brought food to Bhagavan, the food was wrapped in a paper. And when Bhagavan saw on that paper, it was a newspaper or something, there was a sloka written there. And Bhagavan then, as soon as he saw that, he translated it into Tamil for her. That is, I think, verse 3, if I remember correctly, of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, in which it said, when you have the association with sadhus, that's implying with jnana, why all these niyamas, why all these observances, these restrictions? When the cool south breeze is blowing, what is the need for it to have a fan in hand? That is on hot, windless days, it's very nice to have a fan to cool yourself. But when the cool south breeze is blowing, no need for any of these things. So all these observances, they may be useful in certain circumstances, but if we have the association of a jnani, which doesn't mean necessarily just being in the physical presence of a jnani, that's not the real association. Real association is our mind, trying to attune our mind to the teachings of the jnani. So when we try to follow Bhagavan's path, that is having association with sadhus. Then all these observances are not necessary. That is Bhagavan's conclusion. But it's not wrong. I mean, all these things, what may be appropriate in one circumstance may not be necessary or appropriate in another circumstance. So Bhagavan wasn't opposed to people fasting if that's what they chose to do, but he felt very sorry for this young girl, and particularly when she brings food, how can he eat the food in front of her when she's fasting? So he tried to persuade her to set aside all these traditional observances, and so I don't know what probably when Bhagavan said that, that would have had, well, it would certainly have had some impact on her. Exactly what impact it had, I don't know.
Yeah, I think fasting has a place, and maybe in the orderly ascent of us when we do, puja, japa, dhyana, and that penance is useful. But once we reach a point where you have association with the sadhus, for instance, Bhagavan himself one day felt his stomach was being burdened too much, and then he tried to say he would have a day off from food, and then he went up the hill, and then 3 women approached him and said, offering him some food. And then by the end of the day, he'd eaten so much.
Yeah. So these things ultimately are not in our hand. Even if we want to fast, it's not always possible. So, yeah.
So, yes. Okay, thank you, Michael.
I mean, for the body, certainly fasting is good sometimes, but it's not, we shouldn't, if we find it's helpful, by all means fast, but it's not something to attach too much importance to.
But it's also good in building willpower. I find that fasted,
I mean,
it's extremely good in building willpower.
In almost all religions, you fasting is a part of, like in this Ekadasi fasting, or some people fast on Shivaratri, or different times people fast. And in Islam, they have their Ramadan. And in old days in Roman Catholicism, Friday every week, they would have what they called fasting and abstinence. They avoid meat or whatever. Instead of meat, they ate fish, which doesn't make much difference. But then they have Lent when they're supposed to give up something, eat less, or to restrict certain things. So it's there in almost all religions, because ultimately, the aim of any spiritual path, we are trying to wean our mind off its attachment to these sensual pleasures. So abstaining from food or certain types of food, these are all good disciplines. But ultimately, we need to abstain from feeding our mind. It's not just the body, but it's not just the Sanskrit word āhāra. Yeah, when Bhagavan said mita sattvic āhāra-niyama, the restriction of eating only moderate quantities of sattvic āhāra. Āhāra means food. That's one meaning, but the deeper meaning of āhāra, what is taken in. So it also refers to what we take in through our five senses. So by not allowing our attention to go outwards, by turning our attention back within, that is a type of fasting. That's a much deeper type of fasting. And that type of fasting we definitely need.
Yes.
Because we're trying to wean our mind off its inclinations to go outwards. The inclinations to go outwards are what are called Vāsanās. By trying to turn our mind within more and more, we are weakening both Vāsanās and strengthening the Sattvasana, the inclination to go within.
Yes.
So to a certain level, abstaining from certain types of food or abstaining from food altogether for a certain amount of time, these are all good disciplines. But deeper, we need to abstain from feeding our mind with anything other than self-attentiveness.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Namo Ramana.
Namo Ramana.
The next question, which is sort of related to the verses, there are two questions at the moment about sort of illusory reality or delusory reality, world and ultimate reality. Question is, with regard to Bhagavan saying an iota of happiness in any of this externalized world, Krishnamurti suggested that most of us delude ourselves into feeling and thinking we're experiencing happiness in various situations. But in truth, what we are in fact experiencing is self-gratification, which has no connection to happiness whatsoever. So we're back to the rope and the snake. That is, while we're convincing ourselves that we're happy, the snake, we are in fact self-gratified, the rope. If we, in this case, were able to see the rope as it is, we would see we are deluded, and that, as Bhagavan says, there is no happiness to be had in this realm, but our ego is often self-gratified.
Well, if we see the snake, the rope as it is, we're not deluded. We are seeing it as it is. It's when we see it as a snake that we're deluded. But I'm not quite sure how that analogy fits in here. I don't know exactly what Krishnamurti meant, but according to Bhagavan, the happiness that is when we are gratified or satisfied, that is a type of happiness. How that happiness arises, supposing we have desire for a particular thing, whether a particular type of food or a particular possession or to pass an exam or to get a job or whatever it is we are desiring. So long as we're desiring that desire is a restlessness, an agitation in the mind. When a desire is satisfied, we temporarily, that agitation caused by that desire is subdued, quietened. And so the mind to that extent subsides. And to the extent to which the mind subsides, to that extent do we experience the happiness that is already within us. So the happiness we seem to derive from other things is actually coming from within us. We experience it not because there's happiness in a particular type of food or something, because we have desire for that food. Or if we're really hungry, it doesn't matter what food, any food will satisfy us. That is, if we've got plenty of food, we are very picky. We want this taste, that taste, and so on. But if we're really, really hungry, if we haven't eaten for 2-3 days, whatever food we're offered will be very satisfying. It'll be tastier than the tastiest of tastiest dishes if we're really hungry. That hunger we've been feeling, that burning hunger that we've been feeling, that craving for food that we've been feeling for 2-3 days because we haven't had a chance to eat, that is pacified because we get some food. So temporarily we experience some of the happiness that is within. the analogy, but it's actually a classical analogy, but Bhagavan also gave this analogy of a dog who went to a cremation ground and found an old dry bone and started gnawing on the bone. And because it's an old dry bone, it splintered. And because it splintered, it created cuts within the dog's mouth. So when the dog dropped the bone, it saw nice, fresh, red blood there. And the dog thought, oh, this is very tasty, all this. I must chew this bone more to get more of this blood out of the bone. Of course, the blood wasn't coming from the bone. The bone was an old, dry bone which had nothing in it. The blood is coming from itself. So the happiness we seem to derive from external objects is actually coming from within us. That analogy of the dog eating the dry bone in the cremation ground, that's recorded by Muruganar in one of the verses of Vācaka Kōvai. I can't remember which one. Sadhu Om translated that in verse form, if I can remember it correctly. A foolish dog picked up a bone bereft of flesh because 'twas burnt, masticated many around till its mouth was filled with wounds, licked and praised the blood its own, no thing on earth equals this bone. That's not fully, I didn't get it quite right, but it was something like that. He made it into a nice verse in English. So all the happiness that we seem to derive from other things is actually coming from within us. So it's a circuitous path to try and get happiness from external things when the happiness we seem to derive from is actually coming from within. So the wise course is to seek that happiness within ourselves.
Michael, Bhagavan used a lot of dog, not Bhagavan, but Muruganar also used a lot of dog analogies in their verses. And there's so many wonderful dog analogies. I mean, the scent of the master is another great one. For when you said, be in the presence of sadhus. If somebody doesn't know how to be in the presence of sadhus, be like a dog that follows the scent of its master. Don't be worse than a dog that doesn't even know how to follow the scent of its master, right?
Yeah.
And the other one where which one is that? Where there's a temple ground or something. I mean, a temple where there are pictures of dogs, but don't be caught up in the illusion. See the real dog underneath that image of the picture, or image of the
dog. The image of a dog carved in stone.
Yes.
Either you see it as a stone, that it actually is, or you see it as a dog.
Yes,
you can't see it as both, that analogy.
Right,
but there's also one story when one devotee had a certain habit, and that devotee was sort of struggling, trying to overcome that habit, and was feeling guilty about it. And while he was in Bhagavan's presence, a dog came there, and it came with some excreta in its mouth. And it dropped it there on the floor in front of Bhagavan and others. Then Bhagavan said to the dog, if you don't give up this habit, don't come here. That devotee understood those words of Bhagavan were not really direct. Bhagavan was using the dog as a pretext. In fact, the whole situation was created as a pretext to teach something to that devotee. And that devotee, because of those words of Bhagavan, they were able to overcome that, whatever it was, whatever the weakness it was that they weren't able to overcome earlier. When they heard those words from Bhagavan, that gave them the strength to overcome that. So Bhagavan has a very subtle way of teaching.
Yes. He, Muruganar, they use so many beautiful analogies, as did Shankara, as did Mani Vācaka, as did they all, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
Analogies are very helpful they help us to see
And to remember.
What is illustrated by the analogy.
Right. See as well as remember.
So they're
recall,
yeah. So they're very good. They're very good
aids.
Teaching aids, yeah.
Thank you, Michael.
Right.
On the next question, could Michael please elaborate on verse 271 of GBK in the context of karmas like yagyas, agnihotra, homakriyas, etc.? What were Bhagwan's views about these? There was an incident during Sri Bhagwan's time when someone started cooking in the kitchen for the first time, and the idlis weren't coming out right. Sri Bhagwan advised them to offer the first batch to the fire, which is akin to something like a homa. Hence, the question about his views on these types of kriyas.
271, that is the verse in which Bhagavan says, "He who gives do's and don'ts to those who come to him is both Yama, death, and Brahma, the creator, to them. But the truly divine Guru is the one who proves to them that nothing is to be newly accomplished by them." So that's the verse. And what was the question again in connection with that?
Yeah. Says, can Michael please elaborate on verse 271 of GBK in the context of karmas like yagyas, agnihotra, homakriyas, etc.? What were Bhagwan's views about these? There was an incident during Sri Bhagwan's time when someone started cooking in the kitchen for the first time and the idlis weren't coming out right. Sri Bhagwan advised them to offer the first batch to the fire, which is akin to something like a homa. Hence the question about his views on these types of kriyas.
Bhagavan didn't say much about all these things. That is, it is generally well known. The karma kanda of the Vedas, the portion of the Vedas where all these kind of things are taught. It is that is the these are karmas. They're karmas that are done in order for the fulfillment of desires. So those who do these, they believe, but by doing these rituals, if you do it in a prescribed way, you gain punya, and as a result of that punya, you'll have a good life in this world and a good life in you'll go to one of the many heavens and experience the fruit of your good karmas there. But as Bhagavan said, palamasasvatam, the fruit of karma, it's temporary. So doing all these karmas to gain punya in order to enjoy pleasures in this world or some other world, this is all just this is futile, because whatever punya or karmic merit we gain from doing certain actions, when we experience the fruit of that, that fruit is exhausted. And so that is the karmas are finite, and so the fruit of karmas are finite. So this isn't the path to happiness. But Bhagavan knew why all these things are prescribed. For those who are seeking worldly pleasures, it's better to, in order to wean them off this desire for worldly pleasures, they are taught to, if you want to enjoy all these things, yes, it's okay, you can enjoy these things, but you have to do it according in such and such a way. This is a way of slowly curbing people's desires. So if you've got desire to enjoy this things in this world or the next world, rather than doing that by unrighteous means. If you're completely worldly, you don't believe in any of these things, you will go about trying to satisfy your desires by the principle might is right. Grab what you can. If you become more richer, more powerful than others, then you can grab more. And the richer you are, the more rich you can become. And there are people in this world, always have been and always will be, people who basically follow this philosophy of might is right. Grab what you can. In order to help people to come away from this type of attitude, religions of all type prescribe certain things. Yes, if you want to enjoy all these things, you have to abide by certain dharmic principles. You have to, in the case of the Vedic rituals, you have to do these rituals, but you have to do them in a particular way, and you have to make offerings to the priests and to all these things. And it's this is slowly curbing the desires. That is, it's using the desires, because if I want to, supposing I want to go to heaven, and the way to go to heaven is to do this yaga and yajna, I have to restrict some of my other desires in order to focus on this. So it's a way of slowly putting a check on desires. That's the ultimate aim of all these things. But ultimately, the truth of the Vedas is not what is in the ritual portion. The truth of the Vedas is in Vedanta. As Bhagavan says in Echammal, Vedantate Vera Ravilangam Veda Āhāra-niyama. Give me the import of a substance of the Vedas which shines in Vedanta as one without another. So that one without a second, that is the real import of Vedanta, of the Vedas. So all these rituals, they all are necessary at a certain stage. If we've got desires, they're means to put a curb on desires by saying, yes, you can fulfill your desires, but only by following such and such principles. So that was in the early form of Hinduism, was very much focused on those yagas and yajnas and rituals. Later forms of Hinduism, Dharma took on a broader sense of doing what is right, doing the right thing. And what was the right thing? It depends upon your circumstances in life. If you're a Brahmin, the right thing to do is to learn and to teach. If you're a Kshatriya, the right thing is to stand by justice and to fight for justice, and so on and so forth. So all these different, what is right and what is wrong depends upon circumstances and one's role in life. So all these things developed over time, but ultimately, the aim of all these things is to curb our desires, because happiness does not lie in the fulfillment of desires. That's a very basic principle, but Bhagavan emphasized so many times. He said there's no bottomless pit that is as bottomless as the pit of desire. Because however much you try and fill that pit by gratifying your desires, you're never going to fill it. It'll all get and another analogy he said is trying to overcome desire by satisfying it is like trying to extinguish a fire by pouring petrol on it. So fulfillment of desire is not the way. But when people have very strong desires, if you tell them this, they're not ready for it. So you have to give the teaching that's appropriate to them. Yes, if you want to fulfill if you've got a desire for artha, for wealth, or for karma, karma, the sensual pleasure, desire for sensual pleasure. Yes, you can satisfy all those desires, but you have to do so within the constraints of Dharma. You shouldn't go against Dharma. If you want to enjoy all the pleasures you are seeking, you should do so. You should seek them within the constraints of dharma, of righteousness. So if you want to become wealthy, you should be an honest businessman. You shouldn't be a ruthless cutthroat businessman or whatever. So all these are intended to slowly curb desires. But the ultimate aim is to give up all desire altogether. And so in order to give up all desires, we need to give up ego, who is the one who has desires. But we won't be willing to give up ego so long as our desires are strong. So we first need to curb the desires. So it starts with all these karmas, and then it comes to nishkarmiya bhakti, where we are worshipping God not for what we can get from God, but for the sake of God himself. Your devotion is to God. You don't want to gain anything from God, you just want God himself. And so all these different stages of the path, they're all more and more weaning the mind off its desires for other things, and ultimately to give up desire entirely, we need to give up ego. So only after we've been through all these other ways will the mind be pure enough to follow this path of self-investigation and self-surrender, which is the means to give up ego, which is the root of all desires. Regarding verse 271, the point of that verse is, many gurus say, do this, don't do that. Bhagavan said such gurus are just Yama and Brahma. Why they're Yama? Yama is death, Brahma is creation. Because if you engage in karmas, that do's and don'ts all concerned with karma, you're just perpetuating the cycle of birth and death. So Yama is death, Brahma, the creator, is birth. So that's why he said the guru who gives do's and don'ts is Brahma and Yama. The real guru is the one who says, you don't need to do anything. You need to just be as you are. How to be as we are? By self-investigation and self-surrender. This path of self-investigation and self-surrender, this is not a path of doing. It's a path of being. That is, so long as we allow our attention to go outwards towards other things, that is a karma. But when we turn our attention back towards ourselves, we as ego, the doer of action, subside. So when the doer of action subsides, the actions will also subside along with it. So this is other paths are the paths of pravriti, going outwards. This is the path of nivritti, withdrawing back within, subsiding back into the heart. And the means to subside back into the heart is self-investigation and self-surrender, which ultimately are one and the same thing. That is, the surrender can be complete only by surrendering ego. And we can surrender ego only by means of self-investigation.
I think we can move on to, because there are quite a few questions which are not related to the verse. Should we move on, Michael, unless somebody has more questions?
Yes.
So I'll go on to the questions which have been sent online. Sorry, not online, but by email. The first question is, I was reading Ramana Maharshi's Who Am I? Sandra Dirkson's edition, and came across the following statement. In waking and dream, we are aware and are also aware of things other than ourselves. Whereas in sleep, we are aware without being aware of anything other than ourselves. I'm struggling to understand this. During deep sleep, I seem to be unaware of anything, including my own existence. When I say I slept deeply or I slept peacefully, I take this to be an inference based on how refreshed I feel after waking, rather than evidence of awareness during sleep. On what basis, then, is the above quote from the book saying that we are aware in deep sleep? just before we get to the answer, Michael, this is one of the debates in sort of between the Advaita Vedanta and the Nyaya Vaisheshika on the nature of deep sleep, and it raises this entire question of whether when I say I slept peacefully or I slept deeply, is that an inference or is that based on phenomenology, sort of on a certain experience? Anyway, let's get on with it.
Okay, according to Bhagavan, it is not an inference, it's our actual experience. We experience three states, or what seem to be three states. We experience now, the state we are now in, we call waking. When we're asleep at night, our sleep is often interrupted by dreams. So that's the second state. The third state is the state in which we are not aware of anything. Being not aware of anything doesn't mean being not aware. Swami Sarvapriyananda has a way of expressing this. He often says, sleep is not an absence of awareness, but an awareness of absence. That is a useful thing to say to people at a certain level, but it's not actually the deepest truth. In sleep, we are not aware of the absence of anything. We are just aware. That is, being just aware means we're aware of nothing other than our own being. But being aware of our own being is not an awareness of something. I mean, according to the limitations of language, we say awareness of our being. We are just aware I am. We're aware. That is the nature of awareness. We cannot be aware without being aware that we're aware. And to be aware that we're aware, we have to be aware that we are. Again, when we put it in words, it looks like it's a logical inference, but actually, if we think about it deeply, the nature of awareness is we can't be aware without being aware of ourselves as the one who is aware. So that is self-awareness is the fundamental nature of awareness. Whether we're aware of other things or not, we're always aware of ourselves. But we have to be very careful because the language is always misleading. Because when we put in words, aware of ourselves, as if ourself was an object of our awareness. Ourself is not an object. Our being is not an object of awareness. That is, it is just the nature of awareness to be aware I am. Not the word I am, but aware of its own being. So the words are always, the words always fail us because words are not designed to, words are there to talk about objective things. And we're not talking about anything objective here. We're not even talking about the subject. We're talking about the underlying reality of the subject, which is awareness. So the nature of awareness is always to be self-aware. According to Advaita Vedanta and Bhagavan, awareness is what we actually are. That's our real nature. So there is never a time when we are not aware. But is this in accordance with our experience? Bhagavan says, yes, it is in accordance with our experience, but it's a very subtle thing. So we need to observe very carefully. We are aware of three states. In two of those states, namely waking and dream, we're aware of phenomena. And of course, we're aware of ourselves as the knower of those phenomena. In the third state, we are not aware of any phenomena whatsoever, but we remain aware. How can we understand if we can't immediately see this? There's a way of helping us to see it. The way to help us to see it is to consider: we're clearly aware of three states. Two states, we're aware of things. One state, we're aware of nothing. How can we be aware of having been in a state in which we were aware of nothing? If we were not aware in that state in which we were not aware of anything, we wouldn't have any knowledge of it at all. That is, our experience would be a seemingly unbroken sequence of alternating states of waking and dream. We would not be aware of a third state in which we're not aware of anything. If we were not aware, if sleep was truly a state devoid of awareness, we would have no knowledge of that at all. Just like when a film is projected on a screen, it's actually many individual frames. Between each frame, there's a gap. But because of the speed at which it's going, we're not aware of the gap. We're just aware of a continuous picture. So if we were not aware of the gap that exists in sleep, our experience would be an unbroken chain of alternating states of waking and dream. We would be absolutely, just like we're not aware of the gap between the different frames of the picture, we'd be totally unaware of the state of sleep. We may be able to infer the state of sleep because what seemed to be a minute ago, my clock said it's 10 o'clock at night, and now it says it's 6 o'clock in the morning. So I must have been asleep for 8 hours. We can infer that, but we don't need to do that. Even if we don't have any clock or don't have any means of knowing it, we are clearly aware, but for some time, we were in a state in which we were not aware of anything. Another way of understanding this, when we wake up in the morning, we're often aware that we but we were dreaming. We often wake up from a dream. But we're also aware the entire night, we weren't dreaming all night. There were times when we were in a state in which there were no dreams at all. We were not aware of anything. So how do we know that we were in such a state? When we think about such a state now, we may think of it as a state of blankness, a state of even darkness. We may think of it as an absence of awareness or an awareness of absence, but be clearly aware there was a third state. So how can we be aware of that third state if there was not awareness in that state? Or if we were not awareness in that state, because the awareness is not something other than ourselves. We are that awareness. However, the reason we are not aware, the reason we are not aware of that is when we wake up from sleep. Sleep seems to us to have been a dark state, a state in which we didn't know anything. According to Bhagavan, there's a passage in Maharshi's Gospel, for example. He says people think of, he said something to the effect, people think of waking as a state of knowledge and sleep as a state of ignorance. Actually, waking is a state of full ignorance, dense ignorance. Sleep is a state of pure knowledge. What does he mean by that? Pure knowledge means pure awareness. Why does he say that? In our experience, we can recognize that we were aware in sleep, because otherwise how can we be aware of having been in that state? But still we were not, we cannot recollect what that awareness was. That awareness seems to be clouded from our vision. Why is it clouded from our vision? Because now we're aware of ourselves as I am this body. The fact that we're aware of ourselves as I am this body conceals our awareness of ourselves as pure awareness. Because we, just like the appearance of the seeming snake conceals the rope, our false awareness, I am this body, conceals our real awareness, which is pure awareness. So when we're aware that we are not aware what we are, because we mistake ourselves to be something other than what we actually are. That's in waking and dream. This ignorance in the form of the false awareness, I am this body, prevents us from experiencing the pure awareness that we actually are. That same ignorance prevents us from recollecting the pure awareness that we experienced in sleep. Sleep was a state of pure awareness. There was no awareness, I am this body at all. So there's no ego at all in sleep, only pure awareness. But though we are able to recognize, yes, I was aware of being in a state in which I wasn't aware of anything, we are not aware of that. That is a state, according to Bhagavan, is a state of supreme happiness. But we don't recollect that supreme happiness that we experienced in sleep. We know I slept happily. It was a nice, peaceful sleep. Nothing disturbed me. That's as much as we can know. We don't know it as it actually is. That's why when it's pointed out that the state of jnana is a state of eternal sleep, in the sense that we're not aware of anything other than ourselves. We're just aware of our own being. That seems to people to be very unappealing. Oh, I don't want to sleep forever. Sleep is not, there's nothing interesting in sleep, they think, because what we actually experienced in sleep is concealed by this false awareness, our present false awareness, I am this body. To put it in another way, what experienced the pure awareness in sleep is pure awareness. That is what we actually are. But now we are viewing sleep from the perspective of ego, which was absent in sleep. So we can't, as ego, we can't know sleep as it is. But we can recognize that it is a state of awareness. Recognizing this is fundamental. That is, it's one of the fundamental ideas of, one of the fundamental principles of all Advaita teachings. That is one of the prakriyas used in classical Advaita, is just like Drisya Viveka and various ways of analyzing to understand what we actually are. One of the prakriyas is to analyze the three states. And if we analyze the three states, we cannot be this physical body, because this physical body appears now in the waking state. In dream, some other seemingly physical body we experience as ourselves. So since we are aware in dream, without being aware of this physical body, that we're aware of ourselves in dream without being aware of this physical body, therefore this physical body cannot be ourselves. Likewise, we're aware now without being aware of that physical body that we experienced in dream, or seemingly physical body. We're all seemingly physical. Therefore, that dream body cannot be ourselves. But the same mind that experiences this same mind or ego that experiences this body also experiences that body. So maybe that is what we actually are, this ego or the mind. No, because that is absent in sleep. We exist in sleep and we're aware of our existence in sleep in the absence of ego. Therefore, ego cannot be what we actually are. Ego is just a false awareness of ourselves. So this analysis is fundamental to understanding what we actually are. If we are able to recognize, however vaguely at first, that we remain as awareness without being aware of anything in sleep. That is, we remain as pure awareness. Pure awareness means awareness that is just aware without being aware of anything. If we are able to recognize that, that will help us a lot in the practice of Atma-vichara. Because in Atma-vichara, we are attending to ourselves as mere awareness. So if we're able to recognize that this same awareness endures in sleep, that will help us to clearly recognize what it is we have to attend to when we are practicing Atma-vichara. It also works the other way. To the extent to which we practice Atma-vichara, it will become blindingly obvious to us, but awareness did remain in sleep. But we remained in sleep as mere awareness. That will become clearer and clearer to us, to the extent to which we practice Atma-vichara. So recognizing that we existed as awareness in sleep will help us in the practice of Atma-vichara, and the practice of Atma-vichara will help us to recognize more and more clearly that we did exist as awareness in sleep. This is fundamental. It's very, very important that we understand this. This is why we need to pay close attention to the teachings. That is called sravana. Paying close attention to what is taught is called sravana. And we need to think deeply about it. That is called manana. Thinking deeply about it means relating it to our actual experience, seeing the truth of what is said. Bhagavan has pointed this out to us. We should think about it and try to understand that that is what... If Bhagavan points out above that coconut tree there is the crescent moon, and just above that is that little star we're talking about. The responsibility of us is to try to see what he's pointing out. In the same way with his teachings, Bhagavan is pointing out some extremely subtle truths. It's up to us to see, to recognize those truths. For that, we need to consider these things very, very carefully. So considering how we are aware of the fact that how we're aware of the fact that there is a gap between successive states of waking and dream, not all successive states, but along with waking and dream, there is a third state that we experience. Recognizing that. And how can we experience that state? They can't be experienced without awareness. So though we're not aware of anything in that state, we are aware. If we can understand this, this will help us greatly in this practice of Atma-vichara. It's also fundamental to understanding the whole principle of Bhagavan's teaching, because what is Bhagavan's teaching? That is the first question that Sivaprakasam Pillai asked Bhagavan was, Swami Nāṇ, who am I? Bhagavan's answer was, Arive Nāṇ. Now more has been, later Sivaprakasam Pillai added all this, and not this body or all this neti bit. He added that for his own clarification. But what Bhagavan actually said, Bhagavan's actual answer to Sivaprakasam Pillai's question was, Arive Nāṇ. That means awareness alone is I. And then Sivaprakasam Pillai asked, what is the nature of that awareness? Bhagavan said, Satchidananda. So if we're not able to recognize that we exist in sleep as mere awareness, we're not really understanding even the first answer of Bhagavan, but what we are is awareness. We are not this body, we're not this mind, we're not any of these things. What we are is the mere awareness. We're not even this ego, which is the awareness that knows other things. We're the underlying reality of ego, which is that pure awareness, the pure awareness that endures through all the three states. This is fundamental. So if we're not able to, if this isn't clear to us, we need to think about it carefully. And most importantly, we need to try to practice Atma-vichara, because in Atma-vichara we are attending to ourselves as mere awareness. The more we attend to ourselves as mere awareness, the more we will recognize that this awareness is the underlying adhisthana, the ādhāra, the basis of all experience, both the experience of waking and dream and the experience of sleep. All the underlying basis of all these is that pure Satchit, that pure being awareness that we actually are. So thinking about this carefully and trying to put Atma-vichara into practice will help us to understand. But we need to understand this is a very, very important thing to understand if we're to go deep in this path. I think the person who asked this question said he wouldn't be able to attend today, but he asked me to answer it nevertheless. is what I said clear, or does anyone else have any questions about this? Because this is an extremely important thing. It's not, I mean, as Shalini says, yes, there was a fundamental disagreement between Vedantins on the one hand, who said awareness does exist in sleep, and the Nyayakas, the logicians, and the Vaiseshikas, the atomists, who said it's a mere inference. Yes, there's all this philosophical discussion been going on for thousands of years in India. But for us, it's more than just a philosophical discussion, debate. This is fundamental if we have to follow this path. So is this... is what I said, is it clear? Or does anyone have any questions about this?
Hello, Michael. Sorry.
Go
Would
ahead.
it be okay if I asked a question quickly?
Sure. Yeah, is it on the same topic?
Yes.
Sure, please.
I'm trying to practice and find out what self-inquiry is. And so I'm being aware of this sense of self, but that doesn't feel like sleep. It feels very different to the state, for want of a better word, of sleep. Is this just the way it is in the beginning? Or?
Well, so long in waking and dream, what we experience ourselves as ego. Ego is that awareness that is aware of itself as I am this body, and that is consequently aware of the appearance of other things. This is what Bhagavan referred to as sutarivu, transitive awareness. Transitive in the sense that it's awareness of objects, awareness of phenomena. The underlying that is the sutatrarivu, the intransitive awareness, the pure awareness. That is what we actually are. So generally when we talk about awareness or consciousness, we think of it in terms of being aware of other things. Like modern philosophers say, consciousness is always intentional. What they mean by intentional, it always has an object. It's always about something. You're always aware of something, because they're not aware. They haven't recognized, or it hadn't been pointed out to most of them, that there is a more fundamental awareness, which is that pure awareness that is here even now, but that is covered by this transitive awareness, this awareness of phenomena, but that remains in its pure condition in sleep. So what we essentially are is just that pure awareness that we experience in sleep. But it's our recollection of sleep is very vague now, because our view is clouded by our present false identification, I am this body. There was no such identification in sleep, but that our present pure false identification, I am this body, prevents us from it, that it obscures our recollection of that pure awareness that we experienced alone in sleep, and that we're experiencing even now, but it's covered by this false awareness, I am this body, which is always accompanied by awareness of the appearance of other things. Awareness of the appearance of other things is a consequence of the false awareness, I am this body.
In terms of the practice, am I sort of roughly starting off correctly by attending to the sense of self?
Yes, but again, we need... sometimes it's useful. I don't mean to be splitting hairs or nitpicking, but it's sometimes useful to think about the words we say. When we say sense of self, that firstly, sense is a rather vague thing. What is the one thing we're more clearly aware of than any other thing? We're aware of our own being. We're aware I am.
I know I'm here.
We overlook this awareness I am because our attention is all on other things. So this yes, of course I know I am, but so what? We take it for granted. But that is our fundamental awareness. The awareness I am is our awareness of our own being. So it's not a feeling or a sense. It's something far, far clearer than that. And that's what we need to recognize. And we will recognize it to the extent to which we go deep in the practice of self-investigation. So if you find the word sense of self helpful, yes, but it's possibly better just to think of it not as a sense of self, but as just awareness of being, or better still, being awareness, such it. Because if we say awareness of being, it sounds like being is an object of awareness, which it obviously isn't. The being, our very being is awareness. Awareness is our very being. They're not two separate things. So sometimes thinking about these things, thinking about the words we use, can help us to see more clearly what it is we're trying to attend to.
Yeah.
I mean, sense of self, it's a vague pointer, but we can try and pinpoint it more exactly by just saying it's the being awareness, the awareness of being.
And you usually use the word attend.
Yes.
You find that's the most helpful or more accurate?
Yes. But Bhagavan sometimes said it's all a matter of attention. What do we mean by attention? Attention is when we rise as ego, we're aware of so many things, but we can't be equally aware of everything. So we have this ability to focus our awareness, so to speak, on one thing or one set of things. That focusing of our awareness is what we call attention. We can either, there are different ways we can express it. We can consider it as focusing our awareness on something, or we can consider it as bringing that thing into the center of our awareness. So if, for example, supposing we're reading an interesting book or watching an interesting film, we're attending to that. Our focus is on that. So we can say we're focusing on the book. What we're actually looking at is lines on paper, but we're not seeing the lines on the paper. What we're seeing there is words, and those words are creating pictures. So a story is coming alive. That is, so we can say we're focusing our awareness on that, or we can say we're bringing that into the center of our awareness, into the focal point of our awareness. So that is what attention is. So generally, throughout the waking and dream state, we are attending to things other than ourselves. We're attending to objects, not to the subject. In Atma-vichara, we're trying to attend to the subject, to the awareness to which the awareness to whom all these other things appear. So it's a very subtle practice, but it's at the same time, it's very subtle, but what we're attaining to is the subtlest of all subtle things, but also the most obvious of all things. We can doubt everything. The one thing we cannot seriously doubt is our own being. I am. That's one thing we cannot doubt, because we have to be in order to doubt it. So we can doubt the reality of all other things. We can doubt whether anything else actually exists at all. It could all be just an illusion, an appearance, a dream, whatever. But the one thing we cannot doubt is our own being, our own awareness. So that is what we're investigating.
And would you say the word attending is the same as looking?
Yeah. Often Bhagavan metaphorically talks of looking at oneself or seeing oneself. But that's obviously metaphor. If we take it literally, looking means looking with our eyes, but we're not looking with our eyes. We're looking with what in one verse in Echammal he called the āhāra-niyama, the inner eye. That is the eye of awareness, the eye of attention. He says, Tirambi aham dinam aha Tanei dinam ahakankan terium and janayan āhāra-niyama. See, turning within, see yourself with the inner eye. It will be known. Thus you told me, āhāra-niyama. So it's that inner eye, the eye of it. With that inner eye of attention, we have to look at ourselves. Instead of looking at anything else, we need to look at ourselves.
And would you say it's becoming conscious of this sense of being?
Yes.
Or this
Well,
being?
it's not even, it's, yeah, we can say that. We are always conscious of being. They're never, but we are overlooking that consciousness of being because we're more interested in other things. So it's a matter of attention, but our attention goes where our interest lies. If we're much interested in the external world, our attention will always be going out to the external world. But if we become interested in knowing, who am I? What is this I? What is this awareness to which all these other things appear? If we're really interested in that, our attention will follow our interest and go within.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of shifting our interest away from the appearances back towards I, to whom all these appearances appear.
Yeah. There's a lot in the world that is interesting.
Yes, because it all seems to us very real. But the dream seems very interesting so long as we're dreaming it. Once we wake up, oh, it was just a mental fabrication. We forget about it almost instantaneous. Well, most dreams we forget about almost instantaneous. Because they capture our interest so long as they're happening. As soon as they cease to happen, because our identification switches from a dream body to a waking body, we cease to be interested in that.
As Martin was saying, about where attention and awareness and all of that, it's like going back the beautiful analogies of the rope and the snake, or the underlying gold and all of that, where you see, instead of seeing, always see this underlying the adhisthana, see the rope rather than seeing the snake. The snake is like see the projection of the world. So see the underlying adhisthana, which is the rope, or in the case of the gold, you see the underlying adhisthana, which is the case of the gold being from which all the different ornaments that can be made, like earrings and rings and necklaces, etc. But finally, you look at the underlying, all of them are just gold.
Yeah.
So
but
we're always looking at right. So we're looking at the world. Right. Go ahead.
The shortcoming of all these analogies is they are all objective.
Yes.
The rope is an object and the snake, but it seems to be as an object. And the gold is an object and the ornaments, but it seems to be objects. But in this case, the underlying reality of the appearance of all objects, that the objects appear only in the view of the subject. So the basis for the appearance of objects is the subject. Subject means the ego. And we are investigating the reality of ego, what ego actually is, which is that underlying being awareness.
Yes. Underlying the self, I mean, the one without the second, or the subjective reality, the subject rather than the object. Investigate the subject itself rather than investigate any object. Yes.
For me, very personally, for study, the Bhagavan Ramana is to study Michael James, because Michael's explanation just creates a strong resonance in me with Bhagavan. So I request Michael himself to give a roadmap from Alpha to Omega, from A to Z, to study Michael James. Because in last many decades, Michael himself has written and said lots and lots of things. So from where to start and how to proceed ahead, so that I can walk my journey of self-investigation in future correctly.
Okay. I may have written and said a lot of things, but I haven't laid out a systematic course. but that is not really the way to learn in Bhagavan's path. That is my own experience. I have been studying Bhagavan's works like Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, Nāṉ Ār, Upadesha Arunachala Stuti Panchakam, Guru Vācaka Kōvai for close to 50 years now. And I'm still learning from these things. My main focus is on Bhagavan's own writings. So, but I'm learning more and more, though Bhagavan's original writings are comparatively few in number, there's so much depth of meaning in them. So we can go on studying them for a lifetime and still be learning from them. But of course, any study in the spiritual path, it's not just about study. Study is a part of the process. That is, we need to do the sravana, we need to do the manana. But the sravana and manana, they're necessary as the springboard or the foundation for the nididhyasana, the actual practice of Atma-vichara. So we won't get very far in our study if it isn't accompanied by practice. The practice is what is most important. The study can never be a substitute for the practice. It's a support for the practice. So where to start studying? I would say Bhagavan's own original writings. That's the most important. I would advise anyone to read these things repeatedly, so that they're all these fundamental principles of Bhagavan's teachings as expressed by him in works like Nāṉ Ār and Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu. So these are fresh in our mind. So that how people ask me so many questions, how I'm able to answer all these questions, because for me, I can see Bhagavan has already given the answers in his own original writings, either explicitly or implicitly. So just on the basis of what I have learned from Bhagavan's own original writings, supported, of course, by Guru Vācaka Kōvai and other things, Sadhu Om's explanations in Sri Ramana and other places, all these provide the basis for the answers that I'm able to give. And so for me, answering the questions, it seems to be ridiculously easy, but because of this, my familiarity with Bhagavan's core teachings. So I would recommend anyone to focus primarily on Bhagavan's own original writings. Even if you read my other writings, you will find that I'm repeatedly referring to Bhagavan's own works because they have a basis. So reading other writings of mine may be helpful in understanding, because for example, if we just read Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu verse by verse, they're very deep, and the verses have very deep and subtle meaning. So sometimes, I mean, it's good to read them and familiarize ourselves with them. But sometimes when they are, for example, if you're reading something that I've written, you will find that I'm referring to those works in particular contexts. So that will help you to understand more of the implication, because whatever Bhagavan wrote, there's the meaning, the surface meaning, that's we can understand. But in addition to the meaning, there's a huge amount of implication. So what Bhagavan implies by what the words he says is as important as what he means by the words he says. So that's why I say it's a lifetime to really, we can probably spend many lifetimes studying these things and still be learning from them, because there's so much depth of meaning and implication in these things. Another thing is, we shouldn't expect, that is, Bhagavan's teachings essentially are very simple. So we can understand the basics of Bhagavan's teachings fairly quickly, if we read the right books, if we focus on Bhagavan's original writing, we can get a good grasp on the basics of Bhagavan's teachings. Then it's a slow process of, you can almost say it's like marinating. If you're making a pickle or something, you soak the pickle in the limes in salt and other spices and things. That it marinates it and it brings out the good. It's a slow process of marination. So the combination of Sravana, paying close attention to what Bhagavan has written, Manana, thinking about it, trying to understand it, trying to make sense of it, trying to see the truth of what Bhagavan has said from our own experience. And most importantly of all, Nididhyasana, we're actually putting it into practice, trying to turn our attention persistently back towards ourselves. This is all a process of marination, of preparing the pickle, so to speak. We are slowly being, by Bhagavan's grace, through this process, we are slowly being cooked or ripened. We are becoming pakva. That's what spiritual maturity or ripeness, this is what it is. It's the result of this process of grace. And grace works through us by giving us the interest in Bhagavan's words, the interest to try to understand what Bhagavan is meaning, to try to put what he teaches us into practice. This is all, it's all the work of grace. But the grace, as Bhagavan said, grace isn't something that's up in heaven, is one day going to descend down upon us. Grace is ever present in our heart as that, I mean, Bhagavan is present in our heart at that fundamental awareness, I am. That is grace. Bhagavan and his grace are not two different things. Bhagavan is grace itself, and his grace is him himself. So that grace is ever present in our heart as our own being. So that grace works through us. So this whole process of sadhana, it's a process we are being put through by grace. So all our struggle to turn within, to stop our attention going, to divert our attention away from other things, back towards ourselves, to cultivate more and more interest to look within, to all these things, it's all part of the process, an essential part of the process of grace. So I'm not going to write a course of study, because that's not just the way we do it. I mean, it's just not the way, it's not how we should approach this subject. We take any verse of Bhagavan, read it, think about it. What did Bhagavan mean? Why does he say this? What is the implication of this? And don't take things in isolation. Here Bhagavan said this, here he said this. What is the connection between these things? So understanding all the connections, this is all part of the process of manana. But if we are doing the sravana properly, it should be accompanied by manana. And if we're doing the manana properly, the sravana or manana properly, it should be accompanied by the practice. Because we can't understand what Bhagavan's talking about unless we try to turn our attention back to ourselves. Because all of Bhagavan's teachings, they're pointing at one thing and one thing alone. Ourself, our own being, our own, this awareness, I am. That's what he's constantly pointing at. So if we're not trying to attend to that, we'll miss the point, or we won't see what he's pointing out. So it's a process. It's not something that can be, there's no A to Z course in these things. It is just take more and more interest in trying to understand Bhagavan's teachings, trying to put it into practice, and his grace will lead. So I'm sorry, there's no A to Z course, no alpha to omega. Or if there is an alpha to omega, it's all being done by grace. We just have to go with the flow, allow ourselves to take more and more interest in this subject. And what is the central subject of all the Bhagavan's teachings? who am I? So that should, what should interest us more than anything else. So many things are happening in the world, so many wars and so much injustice and so many natural calamities and climate change and economic problems and this and that. The world is full of all these things, but much more interesting than all these things, which are just temporary appearances. The problems of the world have been full of problems since time immemorial. Those problems have been changing from moment to moment. But one thing that is constant is that I, to whom all these things appear. So what is this I? We should take so much interest in knowing that. So we don't need an A to Z. All we need is great interest in trying to know who am I. And if we're serious about trying to know who am I, we will naturally be interested in trying to understand and put Bhagavan's teachings into practice.
And also every verse of Bhagavan's almost contains the core of his teaching, right, Michael?
Yes,
and every verse contains the complete fullness of his teaching.
Yes, we can say that, but it becomes even more full when we see each verse in the context of all the other verses. So it's like every verse has everything in it, but every verse is part of the whole of all his teaching. So we don't want to limit ourselves just to one work. We're not going to study just Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu or just Echammal or just Ākāśa. All these things we will understand each one more deeply by studying the others along with it. And as I say, it's not just a matter of studying. It's trying to put into practice, trying to see what it is Bhagavan is pointing out to us.
In two words, it's attention and practice.
Yeah. Well, the attention is for practice.
Yes.
Shall we move on to Shailene's?
I don't know whether the person who asked this question is here today, but if you're here, was that a clear answer to your question? Maybe not here, I don't know. Okay, let's move on.
In paragraph 9 of Nāṉ Ār, Bhagavan says that by eating sattva conducive food in moderate quantities, the sattva guna of the mind increases and thereby help will arise for self-investigation. Could you explain more specifically what Bhagavan means by help will arise? What is that help and how do we experience it in the practice of self-investigation?
Okay, to understand this, it's helpful to understand what is meant by sattva. Sattva is one of the three gunas. Gunas means the qualities. It's said to be the qualities of all nature, but essentially it's the qualities of the mind. Sattva, the word sattva, sat means being, tva means ness, so beingness. So sattva is the quality of calmness, and along with calmness comes clarity. So sattva is that quality of calmness and clarity, we can say. Obviously, in a state of calmness and clarity, we're able to focus our attention on ourselves more easily. The other two gunas, one is rajas. Rajas means passion or activity, restlessness. So a rajasic person is someone who's always doing. So that but it's not. We're not talking about people. We're talking about states of mind. So if we have a mind that always wants to be doing something, that is rajas. tamas means, literally means darkness, dullness. So if we're, I can't be bothered, all this, what Bhagavan talks about, Atma-vichara, that's all very well, but it's a lot of hard work to keep on trying to put my attention on myself. So let me just sit on my couch and watch the television instead. That is tamas. That is the dull, uninterested, lazy. It's very much the quality of ignorance and indolence. So Bhagavan has used analogies in Vichara Sangraham. That is to illustrate how the sattva helps in the practice of Atma-vichara. So sattva is that quality of calmness and clarity. Obviously, when the mind's in a state of calmness and clarity, it's very much easier to focus our attention on our own being. If the mind's very restless and active, always wanting to do things, it'll keep on being. Whenever we try to turn our attention back to ourselves, there's inclination to go out and do something will be very strong. So rajas is not conducive to Atma-vichara. Likewise, tamas. Tamas is laziness, dullness. So that's also not conducive. The analogies Bhagavan gave to illustrate this, he said, trying to practice Atma-vichara when the mind is in a state of, is when the tamoguna, the quality of tamas, is predominating in the mind, is like trying to separate the fine threads of a silk cloth with a blunt iron bar. The word he used in Tamil is kadaparai. A kadaparai is a big iron bar that is used for digging the ground. So it'll have a pointed end, but it's a fairly dull point. And if you're digging a lot, it gets blunter and blunter. So that's a kadaparai. So it's a blunt iron bar, or not a very sharp iron bar. If you want to separate the fine threads of a silk cloth, you need a very fine needle to separate. But if you've got only a heavy, thick, blunt iron bar, it's not going to be very helpful. So trying to practice Atma-vichara when the mind in a state of tamas is like that. And trying to practice Atma-vichara when the mind is dominated by rajas is like trying to find a very small object that has fallen on the ground in the darkness, using just a lamp that is flickering in the wind. If you want to find something very small that's fallen in the grass or somewhere, you need a steady light to see it. So if that light is constantly flickering in the wind, it's going to be very difficult to find it. That isn't to say that we shouldn't try to practice Atma-vichara, whatever be the state of our mind. Even when the mind's in the state of rajas, we should try to practice Atma-vichara. Even when the mind's in the state of tamas, we should try to practice Atma-vichara. Because Atma-vichara itself will, if we're really sincerely trying to practice it, it'll bring the mind to a state of sattva. So, but it is more difficult when the mind is in a state of rajas or tamas. So the food we eat, and as I said earlier, āhāra, which is the word that means food in that context, means not only the food we put in our mouth, it also means what we feed to our five senses. So everything that we take in from outside. If you're always watching violent movies or something, it's not going to create a state of mind that's very conducive to practicing Atma-vichara. So it's not that when Bhagavan says mita sattvika āhāra-niyama, the niyama, the restriction of eating only mita. Mita means moderate in quantity and in quality. That is, when I say moderate in quality, you shouldn't eat food that's, for example, very, very spicy or very, very that's got very strong qualities. You want something that more. It doesn't have to be tasteless food, but it's not going to be food that's going to excite the passions. And you obviously are not going to take meat or animal products. You're not going to drink alcohol, or you're not going to take drugs. All these things are not sattvic. So sattvic, the food should be moderate in quantity and in quality, and it should be sattvic. It should be conducive to a sattvic state of mind. So, for example, if you're drinking alcohol, alcohol has what? Initially, it may have an effect of exciting the rajas, of make mind predominated by rajas. And if you drink too much, then it becomes tamas, it becomes dull. So such foods, such things are not conducive to Atma-vichara. So if you eat just food that is conducive to a sattvic state of mind, that sattvic state of mind will be conducive to practicing Atma-vichara. So in that sense, it is an aid. That is in that 9th paragraph, Bhagavan, in the 8th paragraph, he talked about pranayama. And he concluded the 8th paragraph by saying, Ahayal pranayamam manate adaka sahayamahume andri manonasam sayadu. That means, therefore, pranayama is just an aid to restrain or to curb the mind, but will not bring about manonasa, will not bring about the destruction of the mind. Then he goes on to say in the 9th paragraph, just like pranayama, moti dhyana, that's meditation upon a form of God, or mantra japa, repetition of a sacred word or phrase, a mantra, and āhāra-niyama, restriction of diet, are also aids that restrain the mind. So the implication, these are all aids. The important word is sahayam. Sahayam means it's an aid. So it will help. It will be conducive to that. But it is not, these are only aids. So we cannot just rely upon aids. You can eat as much sattvic food. I mean, you could, not as much. You can eat moderate quantity of sattvic food for as long as you like. But if you're not inclined to use the resulting sattva guna to practice Atma-vichara, it's not going to help you practice Atma-vichara. So there needs to, these are aids. None of these things are, they aid for Atma-vichara. They are not substitutes for Atma-vichara. So most important thing is Atma-vichara. These other things can be helpful, it can be conducive. So the āhāra-niyama, the metta sattvic āhāra-niyama, will be conducive to a state of mind, but will be favorable if we want to try to investigate and find out, who am I? I hope that was a clear and satisfactory answer to that question.
Yeah, I don't know who it was because it was just forwarded. So.
Okay, right.
Okay. So we've got another, I think 3 more from Shalini, and I did see a couple in the general chat as well. So we've got another 5 to come.
Okay.
The next one is relatively quick, I think. Michael, according to you, which is the best English biography on Bhagavan's life? Thank you.
Oh, the oldest one is self-realization. Many later biographies were, to a greater or lesser extent, based on self-realization. But self-realization itself has undergone many additions, and it has been changed and added to over the years. I don't know that any biography it's nice to read biographies of Bhagavan, but we have to take a lot of the things that we read in the biographies with a pinch of salt, because generally they are reporting things that other people's view of Bhagavan, that most of the stories came from other people who told the stories. Some of them come from Bhagavan himself, occasionally narrated things, but they weren't always recorded correctly. Towards the end of Bhagavan's life, things that had been in self-realization for nearly 20 years. Self-realization, I think, was first published in 1931. Things that had been there for nearly 20 years, Bhagavan started slowly pointing out things that, oh, that's not quite correct, this is not quite correct. He could have pointed out earlier, but for Bhagavan, he's not much interested in these things. But towards the end, he pointed out quite a few things that weren't entirely accurate. And for example, one of the most important things as far as Bhagavan's life is concerned is the death experience. Well, that fear of death that arose in him when he was a 16-year-old boy. How it turned his mind within. That has been, that was recorded by B.V. Narasimha Swami in Self-Realization. Many other people have recorded it, but often they've not really recorded very well, because Bhagavan would have spoken in Tamil. They recorded in English, and often it misses that. Bhagavan often, when he talks in not often, as a general rule, Bhagavan talks in a very nuanced manner. So if you don't understand all the nuances in what Bhagavan says, it's easy to misrepresent it, particularly if you're presenting it then in another language. As far as I'm aware, the best, most, what I consider to be the most faithful and accurate account of what Bhagavan said about his death experience is what is recorded by Sadhu Om in the beginning of chapter 8 of his Tamil book Ramana Maharshi, the English equivalent of which is Partha Sri Ramana. I consider that portion to be that is the new edition, new translation of Partha Sri Ramana, that was brought out in 2023, where it brought out just over about 3.5 years ago. That it's much of it has been thoroughly retranslated. If I were to try to translate that book, it would take me many, many years, because I'm so painstaking in what I translate, so I'm not even going to try to translate it. But I was often consulted about things there. And one thing that I actually translated myself is because I wasn't satisfied with the translation that was there, was the first paragraph, which is a sort of introductory paragraph, then the portion where Bhagavan narrates about his death experience, and the 1 or 2 paragraphs after that. So I tried to make that as accurate a translation of Sadhu Om's Tamil original, because I consider that the way Sadhu Om has recorded it is much more accurate than any of the accounts we find in other books, because it's just it gives far less room for misinterpretation. It clarifies it much better. So if you want to read about that incident, I would definitely say, if you know Tamil, read the Sadhu Om's Tamil original, Ramana Maharshi. If you don't know Tamil, then read Partha Sri Ramana. There are so many other incidents in Bhagavan's life. Many of them, they're recorded in biographies, but not always very accurately. So there's no one biography or no one full biography that I would say you can rely on entirely. Sadhu Om has written a short, just a summary of Bhagavan's life I don't know if it's available still in print. It was first written in Tamil and published by the Ashram at the time of Bhagavan's centenary. and then there was an English version. I don't think it's available in print now, but a translation of it is available on the Ramana Central Fustam website. That whole chapter, that whole section, the whole of that biography is given in that on that website. So that's it's brief, but it covers many of the main points about Bhagavan's biography. Other more complete books, as I say, there's Self-Realization, there's Arthur Osborne's book, which was Ramana Maharshi and his path of self-knowledge, which is largely based on self-realization. I believe there's other things have been brought out more recently, some of which are based on the Telugu biography and some other things. So there are lots of options there, but I couldn't honestly say that any of them are entirely reliable.
Oh, sir, this Narasimha Swami was with Bhagavan for a long time, or what was the duration?
Some years, not for very long. And after writing Self-Realization, he went and he became a follower of Shirdi Sai Baba. He did a lot to popularize Shirdi Sai Baba. I think he started some Shirdi Sai Baba Samajam or something, and he spent the rest of his life propagating the life of Shirdi Sai Baba. So he was with Bhagavan for, I don't know how long, but it was maybe 1 or 2 years, probably not much more than that.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
So the next question, if you can kindly ask this question to Michael, is self-investigation holding on to the feeling I am?
Yes. But again, words are, it's not the words, but what do you understand from the words? That is the definition that Bhagavan gave in Tamil. In the 16th paragraph of Nāṉ Ār, he defined what he meant by Atma-vichara. Sadakalamum manate atma-vil vetirapatikutan Atma-vichara mentrupaya. That means the name Atma-vichara is only for always placing or keeping the mind on Atman, on oneself. So that is Bhagavan's definition, always keeping our mind on ourselves. Keeping the mind on ourselves means keeping our attention on ourselves. So it is, we can, in one that is, we can summarize it by saying, being always self-attentive. Of course, Bhagavan knows that we're not going to be self-attentive all the time. The reason he starts that sentence by saying sadakalamum, always, is that should be our aim. We should aim to try to keep our attention on ourselves always, or if not always, as much as possible. So that is a very good definition. He used other terms in Nāṉ Ār which also express it very clearly. One is Swarupa Dhyana. In the 10th paragraph, he uses the term Swarupa Dhyana. Swarupa Dhyana literally means meditation on Swarupa. Swarupa is what we actually are, our very being, the fundamental awareness I am. That is Swarupa. So meditating on that. Meditation means keeping our mind on that, keeping our attention on that. Another term he used in the 11th paragraph is Swarupa Smarana. That means remembering, self-remembrance. Keep remembering Swarupa, remembering. So remembering is just another way of saying meditating, keeping that in our mind. So keeping our mind, keeping our attention focused on ourselves, that is Atma-vichara. You said feeling I. Again, this is what I said earlier to Martin about the sense of self. to me, it seems that terms like sense of self or sense of I or feeling of I or feeling of selfness or whatever, these terms are a little bit too vague. If you're asked, are you a feeling? No, none of us are going to say, oh, I'm just a feeling. I'm nothing more than a feeling. Feeling is something very vague. I would prefer to say in such context, keeping our attention on the awareness I. Another problem with the term feeling, a feeling is something that is felt. But what we are attending to is not anything that is felt. We're attending to the feeler, the one who is feeling. That is, you can't have a feeling without one who feels. That one who feels is ego, I. That is what we're to attend to. So to me, the feeling I, or the feeling of I, however it's put, it's a very inadequate way of expressing it. It's because we're much more than just a feeling. We have a clear awareness of our own being. That awareness of our own being, that awareness I am, that is what we essentially are. That is what we must try to attend to. Is that I don't know who asked the question, but is that a clear answer to your question, whoever it was?
Well, it seems so.
Yeah.
Unless they've left, I don't know.
Okay.
Right. I feel a great sense of love on this path. Will I lose my personality as I grow in awareness of the true self? I feel fear of losing myself.
We should. Bhagavan's death experience is extremely significant because that's basically what happened to him when he was a 12-year-old boy, his father passed away. And when he was taken to see his father's body before they cremated it, everyone there was weeping and everything. He was puzzled. Father's just lying here. Why everyone's weeping saying he's gone? When he remarked that, someone said, if this body were your father, would he not welcome you with love? So your father has passed away. This is just his dead body. Something like that, they said. Bhagavan, as a 12-year-old boy, he thought about this very carefully. He thought, what is the difference between this body and that body? And then he came to a conclusion. I clearly know the I in me. My father's I has left his body. So from that age, he came to the understanding that I is something distinct from the body. So that had a big impact on him. And that was obviously very much there in his mind for the next few years. So at the age of 16, when that fear of death came, his response was, okay, yes, sooner or later this body is going to die. But it's put in Self-Realization and other books that he dramatized it. He didn't dramatize it. He just lay down and turned his mind within. He turned his mind within because what he wanted to know is, with the death of this body, do I also die? So in order to find that out, he turns his attention within to know, who am I? He turned his attention within so keenly and deeply that the life left his body. That is, if you focus on anything very keenly, at that moment your breath will stop. If, for example, if you hear some shocking news, you say, it took my breath away. Because when we're in a state of shock, our breathing stops at that moment. That is, there's a connection between the breath and the mind. If the mind is agitated, the breath will be agitated. If the mind is in a state of stillness, as it happens when you get a shock, you're paralyzed for a moment with the shock. At that time, because the mind stops, the breathing stops. So there's this connection between. This is the basis of pranayama. So Bhagavan turned his attention within so keenly, but his breathing stopped. In fact, the body became lifeless. He said afterwards that for about 20 minutes, the body was actually lying there lifeless. But because it was the divine will that body had a purpose to serve, the life came back. And after he said after about 20 minutes, then life came back. But that's not important. What happened to the body is not important. That was an effect of what happened, or what actually happened, which is he turned his mind within so keenly that he subsided and dissolved back into his own being, the source from which the mind or ego arises. So that was the annihilation of ego. But that was triggered by a fear of death. So it is natural, because as ego, our actual experience is, I am this body. We actually experience ourselves as I am this body. Where are you sitting? You're not sitting there or there, you're sitting here. So we each have, and what are you doing? You're sitting. What is sitting? It's the body that is sitting. I'm sitting, I'm talking, I'm walking, I'm thinking. We are identifying with all these panchakoja, these 5 sheaths. The 5 sheaths, it means the physical form of the body, the life that animates it, and the mind, intellect, and will that function within it. So we identify with the will. I like this, I dislike that. I want this, I don't want that. I hope for this, I fear that. This is all our identification with the will, which is the subtlest of the 5 sheaths. We also identify with the workings of the intellect. I don't understand what you're saying. Oh, now I see it. Now I understand. That is where the I is identified with the intellect, the faculty of reasoning and seeing things clearly. We identify with the mind. I see that it's in the term of a 5 sheaths, the mind means, the Manamaya Kocha means the grosser functions of the mind, the perceptions, memories, thoughts, feelings, emotions, and so on. We experience these all. I see this, I hear that, I remember this, I feel depressed, I feel cheerful, I'm upset, I'm angry, I'm whatever. All these, we identify ourselves with these. We also identify ourselves with the life. I am breathing. And we identify ourselves with the body. I am sitting, I'm standing, I'm walking, I'm talking. So it's our actual experience that I am this body. So and as Bhagavan said, the term body includes all these 5 sheaths, because nobody has ever experienced a dead body as I. It's always a living body. And nobody has ever experienced a sleeping body as I. It's always a body that seems to be awake. So the fact it's a living body means we're identifying not only with the physical form of the body, but the life that animates it. We're also identified with the mind, intellect, and will that function within it. So these 5 are a bundle, which Bhagavan uses the term body collectively for, because they're all associated with this physical form that we take to be ourselves. So because we take this to be ourselves, the fear of death, the fear of losing our own existence, it's inevitable. That is, we have desire for life, so we fear death. This is inevitable. And the fear that comes when we're following this path of Atma-vichara is not just the death of the body, but so many bodies have come and we have been born and died so many times. So what is far more fundamental, this I that is aware of itself as I am this body, am I going to lose this I? So it's an existential fear. That is natural. But we have to go through that, just like Bhagavan went through it. Bhagavan faced death, and he conquered death. He is Shiva himself, the Kala Kalam, the death to death, the one who conquered death, who conquered time. So we all have to confront this fear. That is, so long as we have desire, there'll be fear. And we all have desire for our own self-preservation. So there's fear of losing ourselves, whether it's losing this physical body or losing the I that is aware of itself as I am this physical body. It's all naturally it will create fear, but we have to understanding Bhagavan's teachings will help us a lot. It's not sufficient. We need to put them into practice, but that understanding that this body is not what I actually am, this ego is not what I actually am, I'm that fundamental being awareness that is untouched by any of these things. To the extent to which we understand that, that will help us to deal with this fear and confront the fear and go penetrate through it to what lies beyond, which is our own being. Was that a helpful answer to that question?
Yes, it was. Thank you very much.
Right.
Thank you. Very grateful. Thank you.
Right. Thank you.
So we're referring to an earlier bit that you were talking about, this question about awareness in sleep. Could one way to explain this is being ourself in awareness? That's much more obvious, because in sleep, obviously, we're still there, we exist, and being in awareness, therefore we are aware in sleep. I find this explanation more logical. Michael, could you kindly comment on this interpretation?
Yes. That is, if we are able to understand that what we essentially are is awareness, and it should be fairly obvious to us, we don't cease to exist in sleep. Therefore, we continue to exist in sleep as mere awareness. That is certainly a helpful way, but that is, however many ways we can think of this to help us to understand, to not just understand, to recognize clearly that we do exist as awareness in sleep. Is whatever can help us to understand that is good. It's a matter of understanding in the sense of recognizing it, recognizing the fact that we do continue to exist as awareness in sleep. Though we are not aware of anything, we are aware, because awareness is our very being. It's what we essentially are.
So now there's just a couple more. You mentioned before that even learning and education, similarly as material things, were gain as part of our ego, and they come from our lack of fulfillment. Being humans and living in material reality requires material objects, and learning and education is something important as it helps us to find the right path. It is even the reason why we are being in this meeting right now. Also, we have some purpose to fulfill living on the earth, and that also requires material objects. Where is the borderline of what is considered ego and what is not in practice?
Okay, all these things are necessary for the person we seem to be. In order to survive in this world, we need to earn a livelihood, and for earning a livelihood, we need education. So all these, and whatever role we have to play, whatever purpose we have, this is all concerning the person that we seem to be. Our aim in this path of Atma-vichara is to separate ourselves from this person. Separate ourselves means to recognize that we are something distinct from this person, and to focus our attention on ourselves, on our own being. The purpose for this, if we call it a purpose, that is what this person is to go through in this life, what they are to achieve or whatever, this is all according to prarabdha. It will all unfold as it is destined to unfold. We need not concern ourselves with that. Our aim is to know what we actually are. What we actually are is something distinct from this person we seem to be. So let the external life go on. It may be necessary for us to study, to get a university degree, get a qualification as a doctor or as a lawyer or as an accountant or whatever. For all these things, education is necessary. Yeah, there's no doubting that. But that's all. These are all mundane things. In the spiritual path, we are not. That is, the external life is not our concern. Our concern is to know, who am I? What we actually are, which is something distinct from this person. So we are, by turning our attention within, we are separating ourselves, isolating ourselves from everything that we seem to be. So let the external life go on. Regarding the question, it's not, having an education is not a problem. Having a family is not a problem. Having a career is not a problem. Earning money is not a problem. The problem lies in the desire and attachment for these things. So if it's our destiny, say, to study, to become a lawyer or an accountant or a doctor or engineer or whatever it is, so be it, let it be. But is this what we actually are? So this investigation, this self-investigation is something very deep and inward. It's a separation of ourselves from all these external things. So so long as we still have strong desires for all these things, strong attachments to all the external things, we're not going to be willing to turn within. So we have to wean our mind off its desires and its attachments. We have to wean our mind off its interest in these things. Yes, but let the external life go on. Let it play whatever role we have to play, whatever our profession may be, whatever our role may be. We're a child to our parents, so we have certain duties to our parents to take care of them in their old age and so on. We're a husband to our wife or a wife to our husband. We are a father or mother to our children. All these are external roles. These can go on. We can play these roles perfectly, but this is not what we actually are. We are trying to investigate and know what we actually are. So we're trying to separate ourselves from these things. And the first requirement is to reduce the strength of our desire and attachment for all these things. Reducing our desire and attachment the strength of our desire and attachment for these things doesn't mean that we cannot fulfill our external roles perfectly. We can be a very good husband or wife. We can be a very good son or daughter to our parents. We can be a very good mother or father to our children, but be inwardly detached from all these things. In fact, the more we're inwardly detached, the more perfectly we will play all these roles, because this ego with all its desires will not be interfering with these things, or the extent to which it's interfering will be very much reduced. This is why Bhagavan, someone has written that Bhagavan was opposed to people taking sannyasa. That is not the case. Bhagavan just didn't attach much importance to the external type of life. If Bhagavan said, if it is someone's prarabdha to be a sannyasi, they'll be a sannyasi. If they're prarabdha to be a family person, they'll be a family person. This is all external things. He said the householder, that means the family person, who doesn't think I am a householder is a better sannyasi than the sannyasi who thinks I am a sannyasi. So it's not the external role that we play, but it's important. It's to what extent are we identified and attached to this role. So the real renunciation is not changing the color of our cloth, changing our name, shaving our head, or growing hair and beard. These are all incidental things. The real renunciation is renouncing our desire and attachment for these things, and ultimately with the ultimate aim of renouncing the I, the ego that has all this desire and attachment.
Thank you so much.
And we can
thank you so much. It's a very good explanation. Right. I just have one more question. So do you feel, because this is what I reacted most to, that like when you said it's about the learning or education, for me, this is like part of the development. It doesn't really come from ego. We are trying to understand the world, to develop. So do you think, in your opinion, is it like coming from the lack of, that we don't feel incomplete? It's a need of fulfillment, or? Well,
why we are interested in anything external. By external, I mean anything other than ourselves. It includes our own thoughts and feelings and everything. Why we're interested in these things? Because we think happiness lies in these things. We think if we get an education or get money or get this or get that or get a promotion or pass our exam or this or that, that is where happiness lies. We need to understand happiness does not lie in these things. If we are able to detach ourselves from all this dependency on all these things, then these things can go on perfectly well. There's no wrong with being educated. There's no wrong with any of these things. But if we are following this path of Atma-vichara, we are slowly trying to wean our mind off its interest in everything external to ourselves. But if it's the destiny of this body to study, to maybe get a PhD, become a professor, or become a scientist, or a philosopher, or whatever it may be, if that's the destiny, it's going to happen anyway, so let it happen. It's not none of these things are an obstacle. The obstacle is our identification with I am this person. And so long as we're identified, to the extent to which we're identified with this person, we will have desires and attachments and so on, and these all take our mind outwards. So if we're intent on going within, we need to slowly wean our mind off its desire for all these things, its attachment to all these things. Yes, okay, if it's my destiny to be a mother for a child or father for a child, yes, then I should fulfill that role properly. If it's my destiny to be a doctor or an engineer, I'll fulfill that role properly. But I need to, while fulfilling all these external roles, we need to be working on separating ourselves from the one who is playing these roles.
Okay, thank you so much.
It's a very, Bhagavan's path is a very simple path, but it's also very deep and very subtle.
I think from, from my perspective, I think it's easier, but if you're trying to use it in practice, in everyday life, when,
yes.
this is when it becomes difficult.
Yes.
It's very simple, but not simplicity.
Yes, exactly. Because whatever be our external life, even if we happen to be a sannyasi, we happen to have no, outwardly no attachment, still the problem lies in the mind, not in the, it's not in the outward role of our life. The problem lies in the mind. So it's at that level that we have to deal with all these things. And yes, of course, so long as that ego is there, so long as there's this identification, I am this person, I am Anna, I am Michael, I am whoever, there will be desire and there will be attachment. So we cannot completely overcome desire and attachment, or likes and dislikes and so on, so long as we have this identification. So long as we rise as ego and therefore identify ourselves, there will be likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, and so on. But we need to reduce the intensity of these things to the extent possible in order to be able to turn our mind within.
Maybe, but this is what you say, attachment, and also I think maybe this is what is the purpose with anything. For instance, if the education is because you want to have a title, or you want to basically, this is basically to it's a part of your identity. This is one thing. The other thing is just a learning because of you are curious. You want to understand the world. You want to be a better person. Or learning in terms of spirituality.
But the more we're curious about the world, the less we'll be curious about ourselves, about knowing what we actually are. The more we become curious to know who am I, the less curiosity we will have about the world.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for answering.
Right, thank you.
Okay, last one. Is it possible to experience the self with this physical body? Please tell me the way to stop this physical thinking when we want to see the self within us. Thank you.
So long as we experience ourselves as I am this body, we are not experiencing ourselves as we actually are. So long as you see the rope as a snake, you're not seeing it as a rope. You can't see it at the same time. You can't recognize that it's a rope and also see it as also mistake it to be a snake. One or the other. So long as we mistake ourselves to be this body, so long as that is our experience, I am this body, we do not know ourselves. When we know ourselves as we actually are, knowing ourselves is being ourselves. So that identification with the body will be completely severed by self-knowledge. When that identification is severed, we no longer experience ourselves as a form. And when we don't experience ourselves as a form, we won't be aware of any other forms. Other forms, as Bhagavan makes clear in verse 4 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, if oneself is a form, the world and God will be likewise. If oneself is not a form, who can see their forms and how? So once the identification with the body is severed, what remains is just, as he put it in verse 28 of Upadesha Undiyā, if one knows what the nature of oneself is, then Anadi, Ananta, Akhanda, Satchidananda. Anadi means beginningless. Ananta means endless, limitless, infinite. Akhanda means unbroken, undivided. Satchidananda, being, awareness, happiness. That is what we actually are. There's nothing other than that. In that, because it's infinite, there's nothing other than that. Because it's unbroken, undivided, there are no internal divisions. So it is one without a second. Ekam eva advaityam.
From duality to unity, basically.
Yeah. The whole of this spiritual path is a journey from the appearance of manyness to the reality of oneness. And we can know that oneness only by being that oneness. We can never know that oneness as another, because then you've got two-ness. You've got a knower and something that is known. So we have to be that oneness. Indivisible, infinite oneness. That is what we actually are. So when we know the reality, the appearance will cease.
That's a bad business model for Zoom.
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. So I think that's all now, Michael.
Okay, right.
Would you like to do the mantra?
Oh, yes, yes.
Thank you, Jen.
Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Aruṇācala-ramanaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Aruṇācala-ramanaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Aruṇācala-ramanaya.
Okay, quite a long session. Time for a cup of tea, no doubt, or herbal tea. You've got various hearts popping up.
Yeah, there.
I think they're thank yous in a different format.
Yeah.
There's a new feature of Zoom.
Yeah.
Skype used to do it.
Yeah.
Oh, there's an extra.
Oh, wow, that's fireworks.
Where do they all come from? I don't know that particular.
Well, if we want to find the heart, we have to look within ourselves.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. See you next time.
Yes, see you. Bye.